are a small focused company. There's 8 or 9 of us, and we are a company that kind of tries to delve into how and why. And I don't stand up here saying I know how to do this and hit the table, because every time we do something, I realize there's a new way or a new standard that we learn from old craftsmen. The guy that built that window in the early 1800s, I'm guessing, the way he did the joinery is different than I've ever seen. And that's constantly happening in our job. And that's what I really love about restoration. I love the science. It was my interest, the reason, and somehow landed here, and that's my focus. And I like to question, because there seem to be few absolutes in life. The one absolute I'll say, in our work, I often land on the old technology. If the technology is newer than 200 years, it's not the best one. That is, if I had to say one thing, my brothers make fun of me if it's anything technology is newer, more recent, then I'm a little bit dubious. We look, every time we do a job and take a job apart, we look at how the wood roof shingles were nailed, for example. Flashing details. The buildings that are here now are the ones that survived. Not all old buildings were good quality, because the ones that are here are the good quality ones. They were building crap back then too, but they're no longer here. Wood roofs. You guys have probably all heard wood roofs are not good, right? That's kind of a common thing. You go in these big neighborhoods and there's wood roofs everywhere, and the people that own them hate them. The new wood roofs aren't put on like old roofs. They're put on as 2-layer, and they put tar paper in between the layers. They've cheapened it. They've completely changed the way the roofs were installed. And that tar paper prevents drying, causes rotting, causes failure. Old roofs, there's a picture I'll show you in a bit, an 1851 church, were put on wood shingles. The very best ones were oak shingles with a single nail on one edge to allow expansion contraction. And then the next layer got put on over that. The next layer, it's a 3-layer roof, no tar paper. I'm guessing those roofs will last 30, 40, maybe a little longer with the wood we have today. So that's just an example of old details. While I have you as a trapped audience, I don't want to talk about windows for just 3 minutes. I want to talk about lime mortar. That is an old church in Lincoln, that window crumbling. But these old buildings are so restorable. I want to just talk about lime for just a minute, because it is the primary damage I see in all my work every day. There's mortar, there's more damage due to lack of lime mortar use all over Winchester. Since you guys are people who are interested and who will tell your friends, I hope, I just wanted to touch on the reason that this problem is happening. It's so prevalent. Lime has been in use for at least 6,000 years, documented. It just feels almost good enough to eat. It's bright white. They used to put it on theater stages because it would reflect in the limelight. You've heard. The technology, Portland cement. What lime is it's calcium carbonate, limestone, burned in a certain way, turned into a chalk material, and then ground up and turned into lime. It's a simple oversimplification. They invented Portland cement in the mid-1800s, started being used in Winchester in about I'm not sure what, 10s, 20s. Portland cement is completely different. It still comes from calcium carbonate, but it's made completely differently. And they started using that for 80 years. I'll talk about why it's so different in a moment. This knowledge was almost lost. The Scottish Lime Centre in Scotland started, I think, in the 70s, really looking into this because they were having building failures. Here locally, we have Pennsylvania Lime Works. They're the best technical support people around. That's where that lime came from. It's coming from a Roman quarry in France. Same stuff. technology has not changed. Lime is special for old buildings because it breathes. You can't keep water out. If you have the goal of keeping water out, putting tar over, it does not work. Water is going to get into a masonry wall. Lime is special because it allows it to escape. It wets and then it breathes out. It's also, if a lime mortar is put into a brick wall and that wall moves over 500 years, you'll go up to old buildings that have curves in the walls and there's no cracks. Because the little crack forms, the wall gets wet, free lime moves into the cracks, the wall dries, the crack's gone. We've looked at 3-inch curves in brick walls. Can't find any cracks, and the mortar was original. The building I'm thinking of is in Lincoln. It was built in the late 1700s. And the other thing is, mortar has to be softer than the masonry units. The saying, Portland's better because it's stronger and it's harder, that's not helpful to a brick, especially an old brick. That is from a place called Fountains Abbey in Yorkshire. And those are the marriage marks from the mason. And that was built in the 12th century. And then Henry VIII destroyed it. That's it. It's all lime mortar. And those walls are still in such good condition that it could be restored. You could rebuild on these foundations. It's all lime. It's just very interesting how it works. Calcium carbonate, you burn it, you drive off the CO2, and it turns into the stuff that feels like chalk. A really heavy rock becomes light. And you put it in water, and it turns back into a putty. And then slowly over time in the wall, it turns back to calcium carbonate. It's incredible, I think. This is a wall from a house that was built in 1860 in Fredericksburg. It's never had any maintenance. So every 150 years, you have to maintain your lime mortar. I don't think that's such a bad track record. You see all these huge old brick buildings with no expansion joints. Every school you ever see built has these expansion joints. They're trying to compensate for the Portland cement not being flexible. These bricks are very soft, and all of this mortar has really washed out because the gutters were neglected for 50 years. So it's just been being wetted, washed, driven rain. This is an old wall. I think that's in Winchester, I don't remember. But it has a lot of original pointing. And the beauty of doing a pointing job with lime is you could color match this, and there's no reason to replace the good pointing. You can save yourself money and just repoint. You just spot point and just work on matching it. This is an 1851 stucco job. Lime is good for everything, really. Interior plasters, stucco, mortar. Here is what Portland cement does. I want you guys to see this so you'll notice when you see a Portland cement job. Whenever you see, and sometimes Portland cement can be white, but Portland cement is really, really hard. Can you see the dark area? See the dark area right there? It's trapped moisture. There was a house we worked on, built in 70 and 71. In the 70s or 80s, it got repointed with all Portland cement. The whole house looked like this. This isn't the same one. It had this wet look all the time, even when the sun was out. And mold started growing on the interior. The plaster started failing because they've removed the breathability of one face of the wall. Which is why you shouldn't use latex paint on the inside face. This is going to lead to failure because it's trapping so much moisture. And lime, this is a lime in Leetown. We redid this cabin, and that's all lime mortar daubing. Very flexible, very breathable. And it allows the logs to breathe. We fix log cabins all the time, and they are induced to fail with Portland cement daubing. And that new fancy rubbery.
Real quick, you said not to use latex paint in the interior of a stone or brick house?
And masonry structures that are solid masonry, they were originally designed to breathe on both sides. We just did some consulting for Mount Zion Church over in Gilbert's Corner. It's a brick building. The west face didn't get repointed. The outside's still okay. But they used latex paint on the inside, which used to be lime wash. You can take that lime and make lime wash too. So because they put a petroleum-based material on the inside that's not permeable, it's not vapor permeable, the paint's now blowing off on the inside. If they'd have used lime wash on the inside, it wouldn't have done that, because both faces would have stayed permeable, vapor permeable.
You're talking about a solid masonry building with plaster right on the brick.
In that case, that was a pointed brick building on the outside and a lime plastered interior. You know what I mean?
Lime plaster, is that an older, I mean like 1880 plaster?
1880 plaster would have been here, yeah, around here would be lime.
So you're talking about a situation where you've got a brick or stone with a lime plaster directly on it, and then
they put
being
latex
careful
paint
about
on it.
either using an oil-based or a latex paint.
Yes.
You're saying get a lime wash?
Yeah.
Just want to make sure I understand.
Pennsylvania Lime Works, I wanted to give you the contacts. They sell breathable paints too. They're not salesmen. The guy that owns it is a mason. He just does it because he loves it. But they're a great resource for finishes, lime paints, lime washes.
Where are they located?
And they're fun to use in Pennsylvania. Sorry, I was
That's
my
okay,
way of
that's
thinking
no
out loud.
problem.
What?
Doylestown, I think.
Doyle, oh gosh, Bucks County.
I can go back to that slide. Where are they?
That's close enough.
They're really nice people. You can call them and ask. I do it all the time.
Yeah.
I have another question.
Hello, it's me.
See, this building is a stone building. They've got stucco on the outside. Stucco and plaster are really the same thing, interior and exterior, in many ways. The finishes, the grittiness of the finish is different often, but the materials are the same. Going the wrong way, sorry.
So are some of those structures not only held together with limestone mortar, are they also limestone themselves?
Yes.
Which would be one reason why they've been able to
Well, bricks are great too. They're great building materials.
age so gracefully.
Yeah, limestone is not going to change a whole lot in our human time frames. Now I'm going to start talking about windows. I just wanted you guys to know, this is so important. I'm seeing buildings being hurt all over the place, and someone's going to have to pay for it down the road. A building just got repointed right across from Christ Church, on the corner of Washington Street and Boscawen. And the 30-year-old mason he was a mason for 30 years. He was doing what he was taught. They lost this knowledge, and I just want it to come back. They don't sell this at Frederick Block. They don't know about it. And the industry's resistant to the information, I think. You want to sell stuff. And lime mortar, the labor is expensive. The relative cost of lime mortar is trivial. Lime mortar does cost more, but in the job, we're not talking a lot. This is the house that we had to repoint. It looked wet like that other picture. This has all been repointed in line. But I put this slide in here because the windows are so amazing. The windows in a building are so, they just make the structure so beautiful. That, I just thought those pictures were pretty. I don't know where they came from. Old windows, what Ed had touched on earlier, I struggled with this question, the energy efficiency question, and thought about it long and hard. That window is maybe 180 years old. I'm guessing a little bit. I think it's early 1800s based on how it's built. They used really good materials kind of by default. They couldn't go to Home Depot and buy those white boards you can buy that are finger jointed that rot really fast. Don't ever use those outside. They would go down to the sawmill and they were getting sawn pine, which happened to be old growth. It was full of resin, full of pitch, which made it rot resistant. And their craftsmanship was remarkable, and it just was the standard. They wanted to be hired. They wanted to be kept on the job for the next year. So I think that was a big motivation for doing good work. The craftsmen were relatively inexpensive back then. The materials were expensive. Now it's reversed. But now we have machinery and ways to do things faster. So I think there's no excuse why we're not. I mean, I do understand it. It's all economic. And it always has been. This window is still here because it was built well. There are probably 10 others like it that did rot and end up on the trash bin heap. The other question I asked was the energy efficiency, which I'll jump to. If you put a good window that you've prevented air infiltration, it's what we're going to get into with the window renovation. That's the key, the air infiltration. That's your energy loss. And then put a storm window. You've got a window of about R2. Not great. But the most expensive window you can buy now is about R4.5. It's not great either. But the new windows that we buy for a lot of money now, those insulated units are going to fog 10, 20 years, and they're not built to maintain. I guess you're going to have to replace the sashes completely. So I think that's a factor. That's a motivating factor for why you would want to restore an old window. These drawings were done by an architect in Middleburg, Versace. He had this beautiful line of, and he just did very classic designs. 6/9 windows. This was that 1851 church. It had 16/16 windows. They're just huge. So now I want to get into window, kind of off this, but more hands-on. A window, this is a detail that helps date windows, the mutton shape. And that's pretty good for the East Coast. This is from a book from New England. But we look and try to pay attention to all the shapes of the mutton profiles, and it's a great way to date a window. Similar, this one fits that 1790 to 1830 profile pretty close. The parts of a window are, I don't really know if I want to just recite this. Do some of you, you have windows you want to restore? Like you're ready to, maybe what we could do is move that window here, turn the lights on, and then at the very end, please don't let me forget to talk about storm windows. There's just one more slide about that. Even though all windows were made by different people and the standards weren't absolute, they're all made in a very similar way. Where's the sash? Right here. So I'm standing on the interior right now. And this one had a very rudimentary interior stop on it. Often this stop would be beaded, but this window actually has it's a single hung. The upper window is in a rabbet, so it cannot slide up and down. It wasn't set up that way. So step one is basically to take one side. You don't have to take both sides. One side of the stops off. Sometimes they're screwed on if they were worked on more recently. Usually they're just nailed. often they're completely gooed up with paint. We usually take these off and throw them away because it's just not worth this cleaning, all the cleaning steps. So most of these windows in Winchester will have a counterbalance system. So you'll often see a pulley like that, rabbited in, mortised into the side jamb. And often there'll be, if you put the window up, there'll be a little door in the sides that you just take a single screw out of, usually, and it just pulls out. It's kind of wedged in at the bottom and screwed in at the top. And then you can get to the weights that are rattling around in the side of this jamb. You can, often usually you see these with ropes on them. A really nice way to restore windows like this is to use sash chain. You can get that online very easily. Sash chain will last longer.
Sash chain?
Yeah.
What's this made out of?
I think they come in brass and zinc.
That one's zinc. You know, you're putting all this time and effort in. That's really inexpensive. So,
And that holds the weight, right? That chain.
yeah, the chain would be tied
So you take
to
out
the weight,
Yeah.
over the pulley.
Mm-hmm.
And the sash chain is made to go through those same pulleys.
Okay.
And then it goes down, and to get to the attachment points, it's here. There's a rabbet that's cut in the side, and it's usually just a little nail through the chain. It holds. You got to keep the chain out of the way, so it has to be made to go through a track, a little track to keep it out of the way, so it doesn't rub on the sashes.
Mm-hmm.
Another sash that has that.
Well, isn't there already one for the rope?
Excuse me?
Aren't you putting it back instead of the rope?
Yes.
No. So you have to make the pathway larger?
Well,
for the-
no. If this window had a rope, there would be that track.
Uh-huh, that's what I meant.
Yeah. They're really interchangeable with no effort. One thing I want to talk about is the stripping of the paint. You know, that's a big deal now. And sometimes I think it's a slightly bit overblown if you keep your hands clean and you don't eat it. But
We're standing inside the living room.
But the one thing I do think is a big deal, when we go in old houses, we really want to get the windowsills clean. I mean, it doesn't matter to me if there are kids in it or not. I want to leave something where kids can mess with it and touch it. And I think the friction point on the sides of old windows is a real issue. Because you're creating dust every time the window goes up and down. So there's lots of ways you can go about it. You could strip this with a paint gun, which is very arduous.
A heat gun.
Sorry.
Yeah,
sorry.
okay.
Heat gun. If this is lead paint, my heat gun won't vaporize lead. The vaporization of lead is much higher than a heat gun. It's about 1,800 degrees. And a heat gun normally only goes up to about 1,000. The smells you get from heat guns are the oils. What?
So charming, a smell. I didn't
Yeah.
even question it.
Yeah, I guess you're volatilizing the linseed oil or whatever the oil was,
Yeah.
because it's always a very headache-inducing smell. But it's not the lead. The way I really like to do it, every job's so different, but we try to make a decision based on the history. I really like to take it to a place in Centerville called Centerville Stripping, and they have hot chemical baths, and they don't drench it. They really are pretty careful with it. There is some wood damage. If it were a original sash from Mount Vernon, I wouldn't take it to Centerville Stripping. If it were the sashes from my house, I would. So there's a decision to make there. I like to take the sashes and get them back clean. We're not paint strippers, you know, there's other people that can do that better. It costs about $40 a sash, $50 a sash, but then you get it back perfectly clean. It's a really nice first step.
Can
Wow.
you do doors the same way?
You can.
Solid doors that take off that dark varnish.
It'll come back clean. It will stain the wood, so if you want to go back with a varnish, that may not be the way to go. It's good for prepping for repainting.
What are they dipping it in, Dave? Is it methylene chloride?
I believe so.
Okay.
And lye, I think the last one's a
Lye.
derivative of lye.
Does that eat if they've used glue in
It can soften adhesives, yeah. Usually not. to the point.
Sometimes you get the windows back and they're wiggly, and we have to tighten them up. This window was made so well, it's completely through tenoned. So if it comes back wiggly, it's pretty easy to fix. Inject some glue in there. These windows are even really easy to take apart. That's the other thing, is old windows were made so well that when you do a restoration, you don't have to throw away all the parts. Because a lot of the parts, this window was completely knock-apartable. You can take those pins out and just knock it apart. It was made to repair.
If you take that to be dipped and it has, for example, the glass piece like you have there, should you just leave it in there?
The glass?
Yeah, or will they remove it, or should
Yeah, you just
should
leave
you
it in
remove
there.
it before?
Because the
they-
stripping process will also eat up the glazing. So he'll give it back to you. If there are points in it, he'll give it back to you with the glass out, or sometimes still in.
I think how.
Yeah. He's careful. He will have some breakage, and he'll tell you that right up front. There's just no way around it. But I like it because you also have tons of breakage. If this glass panel right here, this one is glazed with really hard glazing. If I were to take a putty knife and really carefully try to get this out, I'm going to break a percentage of glass. I think his percentage is better. So you just take it with glass in.
And the other option is to, if it's easy to take apart, you can take the windows, pop them apart, and that helps you get access to the glass a little easier, but you still have.
There's still breakage, yeah.
Breakage, yeah.
Old glazing is so hard, and sometimes it has asbestos in it too. So I like to just, and lead actually. This is still a little bit soft, but I would break a percentage of panes trying to get that out of a window, and it's just painful work. Now after the sashes are gone now, and I've done something temporary to seal my window up, maybe I have a storm window, we would take very seriously the stripping of the jambs. We use peel away or heat gun, because I don't want there to be lead on lead, paint lead being rubbed after we're done with the job. So that would be the next step for us. Get the jambs clean. And do any repairs. Sometimes there'd be rot in the sill. We often would just put in patches, wood patches. There are also flexible epoxies that work really well. Bondo does not work with wood. Everybody uses it. It only lasts for 2 or 3 years. If you put Bondo in a sill that gets wet, the Bondo it's just like the problem with Portland cement. It traps moisture behind it and it forms a big cavity. Then the hole that Bondo filled gets bigger. You take the Bondo out and the hole's bigger than the Bondo chunk in your hand. There are some companies that make flexible epoxies in a 2-part caulking gun, and that is called, I'll think of it. I'll tell you before, if anybody's interested.
Yes.
The very best way to do it is to patch in wood, and patch in high quality wood that matches the wood you're patching. So now that we've stripped the jambs, And then they, the jambs then could be reprimed and repainted before the windows come back. I wanted to now just glaze this to that. So that we can move this big window out of the way. I think we've used it as
Having done the Bondo thing.
sorry.
We used a special wood hardener before the Bondo went in. Does that help, or is, am I just?
We do that wood hardening step 2 before the flexible epoxy. Yes, so I think it does.
Okay.
There is a system, epoxy system, if you have a lot to do, called the West system. They make a flexible epoxy. It's for boat building, really. We fix log cabins with it and windowsills. So the West system is a way to get gallons of the stuff if you need it. And the other company is
You say, is it WES?
West, WST. Advanced repair technology. We buy this stuff called Flex Tech HV. Do you want their number? I'm not really selling their stuff. It works. It really works. 607-264-9040.
Where are they located?
I don't remember. I don't have that here. We use it because if it saves our customer money on our time, sometimes the rot right down in the corners is very difficult to fix with carpentry. So if it saves our customer money, we like this stuff. It's not good for huge holes. It's good for repair. Like if you have cavities where water's entering, it's just good for that. So next we were going to glaze the window. Which one? This one?
Dave, can I ask you a question? In that window there, did that particular window not have the pulley-in counterweight? Was that
No balance.
It was older than that technology? Or just
They were
because
doing pulleys and counterweights pretty early. I think sometimes they just did it the old way. That window has a very interesting, where is it?
This one here, or?
The one that came out of that. This one, it's painted so it doesn't work, but its counterbalance is a little slide. And it's also the window lock. So you put it up, and then if this were free, I'm not quite sure why it isn't moving at all. It's just painted. It's painted so it doesn't work anymore. But it would just slide, so the window could be raised and then slid into a series of holes.
Huh. How old is that one?
I'm guessing that this is, all I can say, I can't say anything with confidence, actually. I was guessing it was pre-Civil War. Just based on how it's made. And based on its profiles, but I really am just guessing. It's made in a very old style with no balances in the way the jambs are dovetailed.
It was made by somebody who didn't believe in new technologies.
Yeah.
We don't have new technology.
Is that common to have 9/6? Or is that?
Yeah, there's a lot of that, around in old buildings. Some of the Versace designs were 3/6, and why sometimes is 6/9, and then sometimes it's 9/6.
You asking me?
Yes.
Well, you do find a lot of very elegant buildings with taller upper sash. The reverse, I can't tell you why. It's just aesthetics, but
Vernacular. Some carpenter just did it.
Well, sometimes the windows sills go right down to the floor, and they're meant to be walked through.
Like a coffin window?
Yeah, it's
Well,
I bring
you
right
walk
in
through
the
them.
house that has
Coffin to the parlor.
between the front porch and the living room.
so that'd be a reason to have a very tall bottom sash.
So you can create a clear opening and still have headroom to walk through.
So I was thinking maybe it'd be nicer if you guys came up here. also gonna offer someone to do it. I think a very interesting thing about looking at old windows is they were always designed for even-sized panes. This is 10 by 12, or 8 by 10, or 7 by 9. If you come up to a window and you see that it's 9 7/8 by 11 1/4, it's not an old sash. Someone messed up. Because they were importing the glass up until, I don't know, they weren't making glass because of the tax problems with England.
Anything we can do to help.
They weren't allowed to make glass, I think. So
That's very early.
they weren't making it.
That's very early, isn't it?
Yeah.
That's,
Yeah.
important.
It was teeth.
They were making it mid-1800s, right? Early 1800s.
Oh, yeah.
But they still followed the old rules, and all cabinet makers are making them to even-sized panes. Now, this glass isn't going to any
Georgian building.
Oh, there it is.
Well, a lot of times it seems to me that you've lost some of the squareness. I mean,
Yes.
you get that apart and then suddenly
Before
it isn't as even as it was.
So this, and we're pretending this is a clean sash. Before I would put this glass in for real, I would tighten it up and pull diagonals. First measure, make sure the dimensions are the same with a square perimeter, and then pull diagonals and square it up. Because the glass will help actually hold it square.
Isn't this a peg or something? So if it's reasonably tight, I can get it apart.
You can drive that peg out and take this whole window apart. That's how we did that repair over there.
Now, when you say tighten it up,
Sometimes they're so wiggly you could move them
but how would you tighten it up, with glue or,
somewhat.
so you would try to inject the glue into the joints?
You could do that. You could inject it through the top here. It's pretty easy to get in. You could take it apart and glue it and then put it back together. Usually they don't need that level of complete reassembly. They didn't use glue. They didn't have good glue.
Right.
So that the joints are made so well. Sometimes you could just drive the pegs out and put bigger pegs in and tighten it up that way. But if it's kind of wiggly, this one is a little bit wiggly, but it's sitting on this table and I've squared it up, this next step will help tighten it another step.
And you said they did not make window glass until when?
I don't know what the date is. I know early on they couldn't make it in America. And all old windows were made to even size pane sizes. They were importing 8 by 10s and all those sizes. And it seemed like the carpenters continued that. Because this opening should be something like 10 1/8 by 12 1/8. All old windows were sized that way, so I could put an even sized pane in there. Does that make sense? The next, I'm going to do this one here so I can reach it. When we talk about storm windows later, there's a relevance. Storm windows in our area, I strongly believe, should be on the outside of the opening. Because, first of all, it protects the window we work so hard to restore. But also because the outside panel of glass will become the panel that gets condensed, that water condenses on. If I put interior storms, my window that I'm trying to restore, water will condense on it from the inside. We see damage so often. So this is the interior as I'm looking at it. Water condenses on this glass, runs down here, and rots out the muds. They sell interior storms, and I think they're for different. They could probably be used well in other latitudes, but in our area, we see the outside of the glass layer always condensed on. So I think it's a big mistake to put interior storms. That said, it is very important. Not everyone will let me put storms on. It is very important to put glazing on this surface first. We need to seal the glass to this wood. And you should use glazing and not caulking. Because caulking, it's too adhesive. It's really difficult to clean off. And it's really hard for the next guy when he's going to replace a pane. If you glaze your stock, if you glaze your glass in, it's just, on both sides, it's much easier.
Hey, David, you ever heard of a trim coat butane tape? Butane.
Yes.
It's made in reels, different widths and different thicknesses, so you can just run a strip in, cut it, you know.
Would it be pretty waterproof?
Oh yeah, I used to make it.
Really? I've never used that.
Clean.
We used that on a greenhouse once, a bitch and rubber. But the traditional way is to glaze and use glazing. And you'll develop fast methods. If you watch 10 people glaze, they all do it differently. I won't do every.
It's like cooking.
Yeah. Do you paint your frame first?
Yes, thanks for saying that. This should be primed too. It should be primed before I do this step. So you just basically get a bed of glazing all around the perimeter. And hopefully not break the glass pushing it into the That's the other thing, is the bed. If you're using old glass, it's not always perfectly flat. And that glazing bed will help it find, if you put glass in this, it's easy to break. So you push it in. I don't use, he's gotten glazing points out. For small muntins like this, I don't use glazing points because you'll hit it with your knife. And it's just, they're hard to keep out of the way. Old glazing points, they just took a piece of galvanized metal and just cut little triangles. So you could cut them really small and drive them in if you want to. Do you have any triangular ones?
We have these guys, but they're larger than.
Yeah, these are store-bought, the triangles, but old windows we take apart have, you can tell they're homemade, cut with a tin snips.
There's also a tool that will help you in bed with that.
There is, and you can buy smaller ones in Philadelphia.
Really?
Seriously, yeah, seriously, yeah, both
Small
things.
triangles?
You can buy small
Small triangles,
triangles and a wonderful little thing. Just slides.
Where did,
Just push it, pushes it in. Where did we get it?
see, there's always another way.
Well, I mean, you can use that except for,
Hardware
we
store in
slip.
Chestnut Hill.
On phones.
Yeah. I think we just went to a hardware store. We'll bring one. Our daughter has an old house there.
You don't want them too small, because when they drop down from the second story, they're hard to find on the floor.
That's a really, really good point. They're lost in all that lead paint chipping
That's
that
right.
you've, yeah, right. That you've layered on so carefully, right?
Yeah. I haven't bedded this very well, but the way I do it is just kind of, just get it in there. It takes me, maybe I should say when I was in better practice, it takes me about a little over an hour to do 6 to a window like this.
You ever found a gun grade material that will cure enough to keep it sealed?
I've tried the latex, the gun grade latex, and it has a lot of shrinkage.
Oh, yeah.
I didn't like it.
We tried urethane.
I haven't.
And there's polysulfide, you can get 2-part polysulfide. I've used polysulfide, but I don't like it.
We just got,
It doesn't last.
what's the new stuff we just purchased to try?
It's called Dual Glaze by Sarco, S-A-R-C-O. And it was, I think it's got linseed oil in it.
It's an oil base.
It's an oil base.
It's a more traditional mixture, I think.
Yeah, it cooled a little bit more than regular glaze like this.
I spend too much time glazing. I just really like it to be really neat, and sometimes it's hard to stop.
Nobody would ever call you obsessed though, right? I mean, I don't know that maybe that term myself, but you might have had some experience.
One trick, once you get it close to this size, and it's hard to do the corners, but one trick with the oil base, like we're using here, is if you have a little cup with paint thinner in it, you can just dip your knife, and then it'll really slick. You can get it really clean.
You can use washing up liquid in water as well.
What is that?
It's a surfactant. It just breaks down the tension.
A little Dawn or something.
In warm weather, this will skin pretty quickly. And then sometimes when you do this, when you've got it really close, you'll do it and then it'll drag. And the paint thinner will do it.
What a drag.
Yeah.
So what's the ideal temperature to be doing?
Like this. Yeah, cold is tough because you can't keep this malleable.
Well, and that's, I mean, a little bit bigger than to go without point. So you feel like it's not a matter that you need to use the point in order to keep the glass from, I mean, you know, theoretically it'll be in some of the person's lifetime that the glazing is brittle and the glass shifts around more. So I was just curious.
I would use points if it didn't slow me down so much that I wasn't doing the right thing for the customer.
Mhm.
You know, on these small mutton bars, we often, when we take them apart, they don't have points. And in a perfect world, these are going to be sitting flat in our shop, and then after we glaze, we leave them for 2 weeks before they get primed.
Because it doesn't harden up really
Yeah.
well enough to paint it before.
2 to 3 weeks you're really supposed to wait. So the next step now is to reassemble the window with the weather stripping. And Ed and I went to Zach was there too, and Frederick, listened to a couple of window talks, and different people have different opinions about this. So I just want to say that. I'm telling you my opinion. I believe the very best weather stripping is made by a company called Accurate. They've been in business for 110-something years. There's another company in New York City called Zero International, but Accurate is heavier metal. And when you call them, they're hilarious. They answer the phone like this. Accurate. They have that kind of customer service too. But they're very nice, and you have to tell them what you want. And I have a slide up here to show you. You can buy this stuff in zinc, which is what this is, or there's a bronze piece over there. This is a bottom. Sorry. This is a side. That little lip, I'll show you. This has already been set up to put back in. We were going to route it. Actually, I want to show you maybe a little bit of that. It makes too much of a mess. But what you do is this, I just think this stuff is the best because if you keep painters from painting it, it'll last 100 years or more. And this is stuff that was being used in the 1800s. I don't know when it was invented. Maybe after the Civil War. This is set up so that we're going to put it in the jam. We've only done one side. This is the interior. So see this? It's now going to ride on, when it's going up and down, it's going to ride on this metal track. And that's a great air infiltration block. There are other ways to weather strip, as I was saying. I believe this one to be the best one. We've tried all the others. Rubber,
So you have to route a
brush.
You have to route a groove then in
So
your.
you've routed this groove in here.
Yes. And I'll show you. How.
Whoa.
No points. It's a thin kerf cutter. You can also do it with a thin kerf cutter in your table saw. It's a little harder to hold the window from wiggling around.
Yeah.
All you do is set up your depth, and I set it up by this test cutting on just a scrap. And I just decided I was going to route from the interior, so I just set my depth that way. If there was some impediment on the inside, you could route from the exterior. It's just important that you set up this kerf location, making this the interior, so it slides freely. And you just have to do it and test it. And if it doesn't work, my first test yesterday didn't work. I made it too tight on one of these. Well, it was tight. It was really fun. So all you do is set up the router and route the edges and the bottom, in this case. The upper sash would be the edges and the top. And maybe I won't do it. But you can use, this is not a high pressure cutter. They make smaller routers that are easier to use, it's just lighter. It would do fine for this too.
So would the other types of weather stripping not require that?
The other kinds, there's a rubber kind that you can put in these kerfs too. There's a brush you can put, so yes, you still do some kerfing.
Still do that.
Yeah.
So after this is all reinstalled and the windows are painted, do you still see the metal?
I'll show you. I'll show you my method, and let's put the window back. Actually, it's okay. Can we just leave it here? Turn this around so. So, I just pre-cut these. That's a piece of bottom and top. It's just a smooth piece. And we would paint this first, because we don't want any paint on this. So all of this would be primed and finish painted. And this, it just gets square cut and set in the bottom. Then what I do is decide, if I took both stops off, it doesn't matter. But I could have just taken one stop off, and I don't have to remove one side. I'll show you. So what I did here is I just cut a 45 on the end of that one and the end of this one, so that this will, and I'm not nailing it, but I would. Did we bring nails?
I did, but no, I didn't. So.
There's just tiny little nails. You would nail this piece in, and then put this in and nail it in. You have to remember to only nail one side, because you have to have the second side movable to fit the sash in. So I haven't put this side in. Actually, I mean that. So now I can just fit this in its slot. And it should go right in there. And it's not going to.
They never did.
Yeah, that's a little.
I have added some thickness to this. I am sorry, I didn't anticipate that detail. This needs to be made slightly smaller, because the thickness of my metal is preventing me from putting it in place. But to answer your question, if I could only,
But still, it's pretty good. You asked the question,
Yeah.
right? Come over here and see. You
Otherwise-
can't. You
Well,
can't.
I'm avoiding her
Oh.
iPad.
I don't think you can really see the metal. I don't think it's a distraction, and it would only be when the window is open anyway.
What I like to do is cut the metal 1 inch higher than the sash itself, because it allows you, at the end, you have to nail this left side. You can nail the top, lift the window, nail the bottom, and you can even nail an intermediate. I don't think it's a huge distraction to have it 1 inch higher.
No, I don't either. Do you sometimes cut the, cut 45 on the, because, you know, over the time, the upper edge of that
Yeah,
track bends, and we've seen it where some, I think it's smart.
that's a good idea.
Cut the corner off.
Let's make it a little softer.
Yeah, and it doesn't snag stuff, you know, because of that moving window, at least the ones we've seen, those corners have been all bent up.
Right.
And then we saw other ones where it was a cut at 45, and it seems, it's much cleaner, and it seems more.
We have done jobs where they didn't want to see them, so we would cut them off flush with the top of the window.
So when the window's completely open, it's run completely off of the weather stripping, right?
Right, but it rarely ever really gets much higher than, this window is weird because you can push it up
Good.
more.
Yeah.
But usually there's still enough overlap. We've never run into a problem.
So if you have pulleys, if my pulleys are right here on my window, I wouldn't run that all the way up.
Right. I would,
Unless you have double hung
you
window.
can pretend, I would just cut it off right there. You know, I would cut it off, if this were now closed and we're looking at it, I would cut this off about 1 inch higher than the height of this. Or if we're being really careful about hiding everything we're doing, cut it off flush.
Man, it's really hard to put a nail in there when you cut it off flush.
Well, yeah, it's true. Then you have to put the window up on the left side and get as high as you can and do, you know, 2 or 3 on the left side. They're just tiny little nails that come with the weather stripping, so the metals match. You should use zinc nails with zinc weather stripping and bronze nails with bronze weather stripping.
Cool.
Yeah, when we ignored the balance thing, but this is the same time when you're putting the ropes back on the sashes, or threading the pulleys, tying the weights. It takes a lot of time. It's a labor. It's a labor of love, but.
Yeah.
Yeah, would that weather stripping cover the little access door for your counterbalance?
Yes.
And so if you ever have a problem, then you can have to take the weather stripping back off.
You could cut it short.
Yeah,
Kind of
I think it's
purpose
better.
of-
I think it's better just to run it over. Because if you do your chain right, you're not going to have to work on those weights for many years. And the very worst, you'd have to pull the little nails. The very worst, maybe you'd have to replace a piece of weather stripping.
Is it common for the older windows to have such solid jambs and frames like
1800s, yes. Pretty common. They're almost timber framing the jambs.
and that's it?
Oftentimes there aren't really lintels, correct? And so this would be used as a structural part of the window.
Yeah, that's true.
When you're redoing a double hung window, and you do have some rattling in there, do you try to do anything about, weather stripping here between the sashes?
Yes. When we get to the last slide, it's the Accurate website. There is a piece that you nail. It's an interlocking piece. One gets nailed here. Okay. One gets nailed right here, and they meet each other like this when they go up and down. So there's a metal piece there too.
That other sash has the bevel on it.
Yeah, newer windows have, this is a flat sash. The older style is why it's earlier 18. This window would slide on this window. But then they made a neat advancement where they were adding a piece to here and adding a piece to here, and then putting an intermediate parting bead in between the upper and lower sash. This one doesn't have it.
So they would only contact them, they'd only be contact when they're actually closed instead of all the way up to that. Yeah.
Yeah, if this were a window where we would make the decision with the customer, with the owner, about whether they wanted their upper windows to be operable, even if they were originally. Because I don't see the point in spending the money. It takes twice as long. So I think sometimes there's a good reason not to do all of that same work to both sashes. Yeah, so, but if you're doing both sashes, you take out the inner stops, lower sashes, then the intermediate parting bead, and then the upper sashes. This is that company, Accurate. Or Accurate.
Here in Winchester. Yeah, I'll keep it away.
See, these are just
29.
on their website.
That's pretty.
It's a very simple. You go to the section that's 4" 3/8 sashes, 4" 3/4 sashes. These are 1" 3/8. This is the one I copied. And you just call them up and say, I want number 3, and I need it 32 inches long. And in this case, and then there's a number 2 for the top, and number 3 for the bottom. We were looking at the side pieces, which are, this is 4CH. So it's all on the website if you want to use this type. They're not great with customer service, so don't, yeah. They make me feel like, yeah, I don't know it fast enough or something. Storm windows. I think the most important thing has already been said. I really think in our area they should be on the exterior.
Could you repeat just the reason for where the condensation occurs and why? Could you just repeat that?
Especially if it's in a bathroom or kitchen area, on old houses, different times of year, you'll see condensation on your windows.
Yes.
It's very damaging if that glass surface is cold, so it's below the dew point. Your humidity is high inside, so the glass is going to get fogged with interior moisture.
Right.
And then it gets the muntins and the bottom rails wet.
And will putting a storm window in the exterior keep that glass from dropping below the dew point?
Not
You can
always.
still get condensation.
Not always, but it'll happen a lot less frequently.
By the same logic, wouldn't the interior storm window then absorb the condensation on that face?
I think you've missed a chance to protect your window if you put it on the inside. And no matter how hard you try, you can't stop every bit of flow. So I've seen interior storm windows with condensation on the primary glass outside of that storm. And it's not every day. This time of year, yeah, I have a house with no storm windows. This time of year, I get condensation on my windows every day. And I look at it and think, I gotta do something about that.
You certainly will if you have no storm windows on either side. It's inevitable. It's just physics, right?
Right. If you put the insulation layer on the outside, the storm window on the outside, I've seen it where the interior window is not getting it anymore. The condensation's on the outside, which is all aluminum. We have fixed so many windows with this damage caused by this moisture. And that glazing bed is really important too. So water can't run down in that, at least as readily. There's a couple companies, they're very expensive, that's why I don't have storm windows on my house. For a window like that storm window is going to cost about $300.
Mm-hmm.
The neat thing is you can go into an old building like that one. That building's built in 1742. There wasn't a window in that place that was square. But you take diagonal dimensions and give them the dimensions, the window company, and they'll make the window as a parallelogram. And so they really fit. And we put Allied storm windows on that house. I found a nicer company is Historic Storm Window Company. they're just nicer to deal with.
Is there an advantage to just having plain old-fashioned wood screens and wood storm windows made for your windows?
I love that. It's kind of the idea I had for my house someday, but they're just expensive to make, and they're laborious to put the hardware in. They're just more expensive. But then there's also going to be a wood element that you're going to have to maintain.
Unless you stain them, you're gonna have to keep painting.
Oh, yeah.
I think the nicest storm windows are made like old window sashes. We worked on a house in Leesburg that had the profile of the window run on the stiles and rails, and there was just one center rail, and they hung on the hooks on the outside and then pushed in on the out, and they were weather stripped. They're beautiful, but it's just it's a bigger investment. Winchester, recently, we went before them for the Allied windows. Is it on one of your jobs?
Yeah, nothing I know with the door.
The Board of Architectural Review is now okay with the Allied storm windows on historic buildings in Winchester.
Was it the one on Boscawen Street?
I don't remember.
Yeah. I remember she had contacted me.
Yeah, maybe that was it, yeah. They're much nicer than triple tracks. They do have some downsides. The triple track, you have an upper glass, a lower glass, and a screen. These, you have to take the lower glass out, store it in the basement, and put the screen unit in. So there is a trade-off, but they're not nearly as ugly. And that's all I have to say.
You said there was a rubber alternative for weather stripping than what you showed us?
Yes, I don't think it's nearly as good. We didn't bring it in, did we? No. There is a company that makes silicone shapes. One of them's a bulb. It just looks like a bulb, and it has a little end on it that inserts into the same kerf we've cut here. There is a system where that works pretty well in compression. They don't slide well, these bulbs. So it would work well on the bottom. We've tried them. We've used them pretty extensively. But it's a little cheaper, a little faster. I just don't think it's as good, so we stopped using it because we don't want to use stuff that people are going to have trouble with. The company, I can tell you, is there are systems where, you know the brush weather stripping? You can get brush that you attach on the sashes and it slides against the sides. There's a brush you can get for the meeting rail. It's the same installation concept. I just don't think the quality's nearly as long lasting. And I'll try to tell you the company. Resource conservation. I think their website might be conservationtechnology.com. It's an interesting website. They have all kinds of shapes of different bulb sizes, and sometimes that can get you out of a jam. We use it on occasion for different purposes. But I just feel much better about this.
Are there any buildings that you've worked on that are open to the public, like a public building in this area that we could go to and see what the finished windows look like?
The windows?
Yeah.
Most of the ones I can think of right now are houses and offices. Sorry, I can't think of one that's...
Well, these sashes are from Stevens City, but that's the...
Yeah, those are just hinged windows, though. Oh, I mean, at the end, once you have your windows working, you then can take paraffin and put them on the metal. Then you can really kind of fuss with it and tweak it and get it really... I was told, I've never done it, But at the preservation trades thing we just went to, you can spray end dust on the metal, and it'll help it be slipperier.
Or plenish, somebody told us plenish.
Maybe that's the same
That makes
chemical.
sense.
Yeah. We've done paraffin. Actually, before we put the windows in, we take a block of paraffin and rub it on the sides of the sashes where you can really access it. That works pretty well. You know, there often is, when you put the window in, there often is some tweaking, because sometimes the window won't, it'll be converging in width at the top, so they can jam a little bit. And so sometimes you have to take the window out and block plane the side, like that one needs. So,
Can you replace the panes of glass with an insulated pane, or does it just become too thick?
it becomes too thick. I've asked for low-profile spacers, but they have a higher failure rate. And I've never found anyone that can be confident with us doing that.
Low-profile spacer being between the two panes of
Between
glass?
the two panes of glass. Because insulated glass has such a limited lifetime, and these windows weren't made for insulated glass, there's just no room for it.
There's a man in Philadelphia, he will do a double hung window, wood with the double pane glass, but he makes the windows out of mahogany.
Can you imagine?
That's the only thing that's hard enough and strong enough to support the double pane glass.
Yeah, we make all of our exterior millwork out of mahogany or Spanish cedar. Won't use anything else because of rot. Those are Spanish cedar, right? Yes. We do it for rot resistance.
Do you think most of the older windows in Winchester are used with the same types of wood?
I think most of the old windows in Winchester are historic, they're old heart pine. That window is. Heart pine was just the common wood being used.
Yeah.
Pine's great wood, but young pine isn't, because it didn't have time to age and get lots of waste products and become less attractive to decay organisms.
Thank you, David.
You're welcome.
Let's give him a big hand for this.